All right, so Ezekiel, we started in chapters 25 through 32, and I mentioned this last week, is a new section in the book of Ezekiel, where he's going to start pronouncing judgment and prophesying, not concerning Jerusalem or Israel anymore, but now it's the surrounding nations, all of the Gentiles, which is just any nation that's not Israel. And so we've already looked in chapter 25, we've already looked at Ammon, the Ammonites, and then we looked at the Moabites, and we looked at the Edomites, and we looked at the Philistines, or Philistia, which was the end of chapter 25. And we started on the fifth city, which is Tyre. So, and there's a total of 7 cities that we will look at within the span of chapter 25 through 32. There will be a total of 7 nations that are dealt with, and we continue tonight as we get into chapter 27. It's really a continuation of Tyre, and we're continuing to look at what we started last week, and it happened to be perfect timing, as the Lord does. Especially tonight, you're going to see the reason for Tyre and the destruction that's coming was something that we are very familiar with here in 2024, and that's something called pride. Especially right now, in this month. It's all around us. God takes it very seriously. And God indicts the whole nation. And we're going to see some spiritual implications to this, but there were some physical and real destructive implications when it came to the surrounding areas. And that's kind of what chapter 27 is about here, as we continue his prophecy concerning this place called Tyre. So, the word of the Lord, verse 1, Ezekiel chapter 27. The word of the Lord came again unto me, saying, Now thou son of man, take up a lamentation for Tyrus, or Tyre, and say unto Tyrus, O thou art situate at the entry of the sea, which art a merchant of the people for many isles. Thus saith the Lord God, O Tyre, thou hast said, I am of perfect beauty. Thy borders are in the midst of the seas. Thy builders have perfected thy beauty. They have made all thy ships boards of fir trees and of cedar, and they have taken cedars from Lebanon, massive cedar trees, by the way, in Lebanon, to make masts for thee. Of the oaks of Bashan have they made thine oars. The company of the Asherites, descendants of Asher, one of the 12 tribes of Israel, the Asherites have made your benches of ivory brought out of the isles of Chittim, and fine linen with broidered work from Egypt was that which thou spreadest forth to be your sail. Blue and purple from the isles of Elisha was that which covered thee. Verse 8, the inhabitants of Zidon, or Sidon, and Arvad were thy mariners, thy wise men. O Tyre, that were in thee were thy pilots. The ancients of Gebal and the wise men thereof were in thee, thy caulkers at all the ships of the sea, with their mariners were in thee to occupy thy merchandise. And they of Persia and of lewd, and of foot were in thine army. Thy men of war were hanged. They hanged their shield and their helmets in thee. Thy set forth thy comeliness. The men of Arvid, or the coast of Syria, with thine army were upon thy walls round about, and the Gammadims were in thy towers. They hanged their shields upon thy walls round about. They have made thy beauty perfect. And Tarshish, verse 12, was thy merchant, by reason of the multitude of all kinds of riches, with silver, iron, tin, and lead, and they traded in thy fairs. Javan, Tubal, and Meshech, and they were thy merchants. They traded the persons of men and vessels of brass in your market. They of the house of Togarma traded in thy fairs with horses and with horsemen and mules. And these men of Dedan were thy merchants. Many isles were the merchandise of your hands. They brought thee for a present horns of ivory and ebony. Syria was thy merchant, by reason of the multitude of the waters of thy making. They occupied in thy fairs with emeralds and purple and broidered work, and fine linen and coral and agate or rubies. Verse 17, Judah and the land of Israel were thy merchandise as well. They traded in your markets. Wheat of Minnith, and Panag, and honey, and oil. Panera bread is there. That comes from verse 17. Just kidding. But they are pastries that are being spoken of there. And oil and balm. Verse 18. Damascus was your merchants in the multitude of the wares of thy making. For the multitude of all riches in the wine of Helbon and white wool. Verse 19, Dan also and Javan, going to and fro, occupied in thy fairs, bright iron, cassia, and calamus, and were in thy market. Verse 20, Dedan was thy merchant in precious clothes for chariots. Arabia and all the princes or leaders of Kedar, they occupied with thee in lambs, and in rams and goats. In these were they thy merchants. The merchants of Sheba and Ramah, they were thy merchants. They occupied in thy fairs with chief of all spices and with precious stones and gold. Haran and Cana and Eden, these the merchants of Sheba and Asher and Chilmad were thy merchants, and these were thy merchants in all sorts of things, in blue clothes and broidered work, and in the chest of rich apparel or clothing, bound with cords and made of cedar among thy merchandise. The ships of Tarshish did sing of thee in thy markets, and thou wast replenished and made very glorious in the midst of the sea. So here in verse 1 through 25, that big chunk that we just read, all that is being displayed, all that the Lord through Ezekiel is getting across is how great, how powerful, how rich, and how it seemed no one could stop this force called Tyre. They were in the perfect location, there between kind of the Mesopotamia region and Egypt. And so just all kinds of trade, that's what we were reading about. Whether you're talking about gold, clothing, wheat, pastries, all kinds of just luxurious kind of living things, you know, that you would, even in, especially in these ancient times that we're reading about, they flowed through this seaport city or nation they had a king in this place called Tyre, and they thought they were the best. They thought they were, no one could mess with us. And even Nebuchadnezzar, remember we talked about, he will have them laid siege, he will kind of have them held hostage for 12 years, but he's unable to totally conquer until you get to Alexander the Great, which we talked about that a little bit last week. And Ezekiel chapter 26 is pretty neat when it comes to comparing that to the way that Alexander the Great, which is in history books, actually took over this place, Tyre. And so this was the area what Tyre, in fact there's some debate on whether we can really know the exact location of Tyre, because it was this island that now is probably underwater way down, and it's the Phoenicians that really this area is speaking of, which were they were very noble, and especially in just the things that they could make, arts and crafts, we might say. And they would really, we get the whole ancient historical pirate stories from these